My old woman, how are you? The sun had barely kissed the horizon when he stepped onto the porch, the wooden planks creaking under his boots. The air held that early morning chill that pinched the skin just enough to feel alive. His eyes scanned the quiet yard, the swing gently swaying with the breeze, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He knew she'd be up already, his old woman, the love of his life, the woman who made coffee strong enough to revive the dead and opinions sharp enough to slice through steel. And there she was, in her faded robe with wild gray curls and bare feet, staring into the distance like she owned the whole world. My old woman, how are you? He called out, half laughing, half amazed that she still took his breath away after all these years. She turned her head slowly, squinting against the sun. A grin broke across her face, mischievous, knowing, and just a little smug. Still breathing, so I guess God ain't done with me yet, she replied, voice gravelly with age but still laced with the sass that had once made him fall hard and fast. She patted the seat beside her on the swing, and he knew better than to keep her waiting. He sat down, groaning dramatically like he was 100 years old, and she rolled her eyes. You moan louder getting into a seat than you did on our wedding night, she muttered, sipping her coffee. He choked on his laughter. This was her style, sharp tongue, warm heart, and zero patience for sentimentality. But there was love in every barb, every jab, and every sideways glance. He reached for her hand, those fingers still nimble despite the arthritis, and gave it a gentle squeeze. They sat in silence for a while, just like they used to when the kids were grown and the noise of life had finally dulled into a quiet background hum. The world around them had changed, phones, politics, even the taste of milk, she swore, but what hadn't changed was the rhythm they moved in. She would start humming some tune from the 60s, and he'd tap his fingers to the beat like they were still dancing in a smoky roadside bar with a jukebox playing heartbreak songs. You know, she said suddenly, I've been thinking about that red dress I wore when we met. He laughed. The one with the slit that nearly caused me to crash my car into the curb? She nodded with a proud smirk. I wore that dress to be noticed. You just happened to be the fool looking. He smiled at her, eyes softening. Best mistake I ever made. The wind picked up a little, and she pulled her robe tighter, still holding his hand. You still call me old woman, like it's a joke, but one day you'll blink and I'll be gone. Then what? Her voice was quiet, not sad, just real, like everything she said. He didn't flinch. Then I'll talk to your ghost every morning, and you'll haunt me with that damn coffee and terrible jazz music. Her eyes shimmered, but not from tears, just the kind of depth that comes with decades of shared laughter, pain, arguments over nothing, and reconciliations in dim kitchens. I'm not afraid of going, she said. I'm just afraid of leaving you without someone to keep your ego in check. He chuckled. Trust me, no one could ever replace that job. Do you remember our first fight? She asked out of nowhere. He raised his eyebrows. Which one? The one about the burnt meatloaf or the one where I forgot your birthday and thought flowers from the gas station were romantic? She snorted. You poor, clueless man. And yet, I kept you anyway. Must have seen something in you worth the trouble. He kissed her hand then, slow, soft, reverent. You saw everything in me, even the parts one didn't know existed. You made a home out of me. She sighed, leaning her head on his shoulder. I didn't make a home out of you, I made a war zone peaceful. You were the storm, and I learned to dance in the rain. Time ticked by gently. A bird landed on the porch rail, chirping a sweet tune. She tilted her head. One of the grandkids is coming by today, right? He nodded. Yeah, probably bringing another handmade card that says, to Granny and Grandpa, the coolest fossils I know. She laughed. At least we're legendary fossils. He looked at her then, truly looked, past the lines etched by years, past the graying hair and the slow shuffle in her steps. He saw the fire that still lived in her eyes, the one that had once challenged him to be better, to love harder, to stay longer. My old woman, he whispered, how are you? She smiled, leaning in to kiss his cheek. Still yours, that's all that matters. The screen door creaked open behind them, and the scent of cinnamon and baked apples wafted through the porch. She had left a pie in the oven, the old-fashioned kind she refused to let anyone help with. He glanced toward the door, then back at her. You know, you never did write down that recipe. She grinned without looking at him. Some things shouldn't be written down. They're meant to be remembered, tasted, passed down with hands, not paper. He chuckled, the sound low and full. You just want them all to suffer trying to figure it out. She closed her eyes for a moment, face tilted to the sun like she was soaking up every second. He knew she was cataloging the moment. She always did that. Paused long enough to record memories in that invisible notebook she kept in her heart. He'd once asked her why she did that, and she told him, because life is made of pieces, and I don't want to lose even the broken ones. It was something that always stayed with him, how she could find meaning in the smallest cracks of time. The grandchild she'd mentioned finally arrived, all freckles and energy, stumbling onto the porch with a colorful drawing clutched in one hand. "Granny," she called out, her little voice full of pride. "I drew you a dragon." The old woman laughed, accepting the gift like it was a masterpiece. "A dragon, huh? Looks more like Grandpa when he's hungry." The child looked between the two and giggled, as if that was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. The man grinned and growled playfully, lifting the girl onto his lap while she squealed. They spent the afternoon wrapped in the kind of comfort that only time can build, no rush, no schedule, just the patient passing of sunlight across the yard. She told stories, some true and some wildly exaggerated, the kind that made her grandkids hang on every word. He watched her in awe, the way her hands painted the air as she spoke, the sparkle in her eye as she twisted facts into fairy tales. He'd heard these stories 1,000 times, but he never tired of them. She had a magic no one could copy. Later, when the house grew quieter and the child had gone home with a promise to return soon, the couple returned to their perch on the porch. The sky was shifting, turning shades of amber and violet. "It's almost June," she murmured. "You remember what we used to do in June?" He nodded. He raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe you just never learned to follow." They both smiled, that familiar tug of affection warming the air between them. A quiet settled then, a silence that wasn't empty but full of everything unspoken. They didn't need words to remember the life they'd built, the years of struggle, of joy, of loss and resilience. He thought of the hospital visits, the near misses, the time she'd almost left him for good when her heart faltered. But somehow, she always came back, like a stubborn storm that refused to pass. "You scared me, you know," he said softly. "That night, I thought I'd lost you." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "I wasn't ready to go. Still had too many things to complain about." He reached up and brushed a strand of silver from her forehead. "You think the kids know how lucky they are?" She shrugged. "Probably not, but one day, when they're old and stubborn like us, they'll get it." He kissed her temple, letting his lips linger there. "You're not just my old woman. You're my whole damn world." Her hand found his again, their fingers interlocking in the same way they had when they were young and bold, and thought forever was just a word. The crickets began to sing as night edged closer. Stars blinked awake, one by one, across the deepening sky. She sighed contentedly. "If this is the last porch we ever sit on, I'm okay with that." He looked at her, eyes damp with emotion. "Let's promise something," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Still making promises at this age?" He smiled. "Promise me that when we meet again, wherever that is, you'll still be you. Still wild, still sharp, still mine." She squeezed his hand and whispered, "Always." The night deepened around them like an old friend returning from a long journey, wrapping the porch in gentle darkness and stars that blinked like secrets. She sat with her legs tucked beneath her, the quilt she'd made decades ago draped over her knees. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the rustle of trees and the soft rhythm of her breathing. There was something sacred about this hour, something unspoken that only those who had loved for a lifetime could understand. No more need for grand declarations. Every glance, every shared silence, said enough. The memories danced between them as the moon rose. The sound of small feet running through the house, the crash of broken dishes from their first clumsy dinner party, the heat of old arguments, and the quiet forgiveness that always followed. He remembered how she used to sing to herself while folding laundry, off-key but full of soul, and how she could turn a burnt roast into a family legend. These were the things that made her unforgettable, not just her beauty or her wit, but her ability to turn the ordinary into something eternal. She looked over at him then, her eyes soft with something deeper than nostalgia. "You know," she said, "sometimes I wonder what kind of life I would have had if I'd taken a different path. But no matter how far I let that thought wander, it always brings me right back here. He reached out and brushed his fingers along the edge of her quilt. Even if the road had split 100 different ways, I think we would have found each other somehow. Some loves don't obey directions, they just happen. A breeze swept through, lifting the edges of the quilt and carrying the scent of honeysuckle. She smiled. Remember that old road trip we took through the mountains? No map, no plan. Just us and that beat-up Chevy. He laughed, the sound a low rumble in his chest. And no brakes. I thought we were going to meet our maker on that one-lane cliffside. She nudged him playfully. Best near-death experience of my life. Their laughter floated into the night, a sound that felt like music meant just for the stars. The quiet returned, but it wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, like worn leather or a favorite song. She reached up to adjust the blanket on his lap, pretending not to notice the way his hands trembled now more than they used to. He caught her doing it, and instead of brushing it off, he let the moment stay tender. I'm not as strong as I once was, he said softly. But somehow, you still make me feel invincible. She didn't speak. She just laid her head on his shoulder and let the truth hang there like a lantern in the dark. The house behind them was old, creaky, and full of ghosts they'd invited in over the years. Ghosts of birthdays, storms, kisses in hallways, and long, aching winters. She used to hate the creaks, used to say they made her feel like the house was talking back. But now, each groan in the floorboards was a voice from their past, saying, you lived here. You loved here. And that meant everything. Even the chipped paint and crooked frames felt like a living part of their story. He looked out at the yard where their grandchildren had once run barefoot through sprinklers, where she had once gardened with a wide straw hat and dirt under her nails. That yard had been their kingdom. And now, it was quiet, resting, just like them. If this is the last chapter, he murmured, I think we wrote a good book. She turned to him slowly, eyes shining. A great book, one with plot twists, laughter, heartbreak, and a hell of a lot of love. The stars were brighter now, a full constellation over their porch, as if the sky itself wanted to remember them. She looked up and whispered, one day, someone will sit here like us, wondering if they did life right. He nodded. And maybe, just maybe, they'll feel us in the wind, like a whisper saying, keep going. Love deeper, sit longer, and in that moment, wrapped in night and memory, their love didn't feel old at all.